Rochester. Welcome to the Equity Series. My name is Wafa Elkhalifa, and I work for Destination Medical Center as the Equitable Development Coordinator. And I would like to welcome my colleague and my partner, Chao Mwatela. Welcome, Chao.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Chao Mwatela, and I have the great pleasure of serving the city of Rochester as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Director, and certainly very grateful to have this partnership with Wafa on the Equity Series.
Awesome. So we have decided to do something different for the December episode as we noticed that it falls in a very busy time of the year. We wanted to pre-record the episode and you will be able to view what we have recorded in the YouTube channel, which we will share the link with all of you in the email. And Chao and I decided to use this time to kind of dig deep into what is the Equity Alliance, what have we accomplished so far, and what are our dreams and hopes, and just keep it light for the December episode as we wrap the year. So I'll begin with the first question, Chao. What is the Equity Alliance?
And I would respond by saying, I think the Equity Alliance is a dream, right? A dream of having organizations within the Rochester community, whether they are private organizations, public, local governments, nonprofits, get together and really collaborate on equity work. And I would say a big part of the Equity Alliance is the idea that all of these organizations are looking internally at themselves and the work that they do and the services that they provide to the community, and are working internally to change their practices, to change their systems, to change their programs, really centering equity in everything that they do. And as we were having this discussion, Wafa, one of the things that we said is it would be important to be really clear about the areas that Equity Alliance would like to focus on, right? And so we decided to come up with 5 anchors that are the anchors of the Equity Alliance. And the first anchor is continuous improvement, right? How does an organization focus on continuous improvement from an equity perspective? And it's in 2 ways. The first one being having an equity audit. A lot of times in equity work, we are reactive to things that are happening externally in our specific community or in the country or anywhere that we live. And we react to that by saying, oh, we need to have this program. We need to donate X amount of money, right? We need to do whatever thing. But what we're really saying is taking a pause and looking at our very specific organizations from an equity perspective and getting an audit to provide us a baseline on where we are in equity. And that might include things that vary from accessibility. It could be, are our websites 508 compliant, right? It could be from a racial perspective, from a religious perspective, all of the things that we could think about in terms of diversity and equity, getting that baseline, because then that allows each organization to say, where do I begin? What should I prioritize? And how do I make a plan, which is kind of the second portion there. You could do an internal audit, right? But you could also utilize some of the indexes that already exist. And some of those indexes include the Municipality Equality Index, which is very specific to our LGBTQ plus community. It could be a disability index that already is curated and exists. It could be a racial equity index. Those exist. So marrying the 2 together, an internal equity audit along with some of the indexes that already exist. And then the second part is reflecting on that continuous improvement, the equity audits, as well as the indexes, to say, how do I come up with a diversity, equity, and inclusion action plan? Action being that underlying term. What are the things that my organization or your organization will commit to, right? That those goals are smart and actionable, that we have metrics or KPIs to be able to measure how we are doing. And then how are those attached to the organization-wide strategic plan? Because a lot of times organizations have equity plans, but those equity plans are not tied to the overarching strategic plan of an organization. So making sure that those goals and action items are anchored to that. And then a third one, which we consider a really large part of it, is economic impact, right? All of our organizations in this community can have or not can have, actually do have an economic footprint on our community. But being really reflective on what kind of impact are we having, and are there things within our own organizations that we have historically done that have a negative economic impact on underrepresented communities, right? And then reflecting on and saying, how do we change some of those systems? And we'll get into it. You know, a really big one is looking at your procurement practices and saying, who or where are you spending your money as an organization, right? And being very intentional in disaggregating that information to say, how are we impacting from a gender perspective, women-owned businesses, right? How are we prioritizing minority-owned businesses? And in this case, we're talking about from a race perspective, right? From veteran-owned businesses, folks with disabilities who own their own businesses in town, and then saying, if there's a disparity in that, what do you need to do to fix it? What kind of goals do you need to set, right? Do you have a supplier diversity program? Is that something that you need to develop? So making sure that your economic footprint is really impacting communities that historically have been marginalized. And then fourth is transparency. Are you sharing this within your own organization? All of the above? And are you sharing this with the community at large? For two reasons. We serve our communities and we want them to know that we're being intentional in our work. But secondly, there is an accountability component to being transparent about the work that you're doing. So in sharing a lot of our work, whether it's our indexing or our action goals that are very specific to equity, by sharing those broadly with the community, we have a layer of, we really need to get this done, right? And we need to share with our community as we're getting it done, what barriers are we facing, right? Why haven't we met this specific goal that we committed to a year ago? How can they be partners in helping us do that? And the fifth one is pretty much the baseline of the Equity Alliance, which is radical collaboration. How do we work with each other in ways that we have never before, right? And commit to that collaboration with the hope that we're changing really large systems. Because, you know, Wafa, you at DMC could work really hard and diligently at what you're doing. I could do the same thing at the city, nonprofits could do the same. But if we're doing that in isolation, we know from history that is not going to have the same impact as if we worked together. Because our community members, they don't feel the impacts of just one organization, right? They feel the impact of an entire system in the community that they live. So how do we work collaboratively so that our community members can feel a shift, right, in the equity space? So very long explanation, but wanted to focus some time on these anchors and why we're saying that the Equity Alliance is a look inside our organizations as opposed to looking at equity as an outcome on the outside. So
I was just gonna add that with all the efforts that we have in our community, the Equity Alliance focuses on the organization level. We do have some really awesome efforts in the community right now where it focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners or members of different organizations and how they're looking for resources and support and space to connect with each other. But what the Equity Alliance would like to focus on is how can a whole organization collaborate with another organization in order to create transformation in our community and equitable changes in our policies, in our practices, in order to see results that would make a bigger impact in the community.
And I'm glad you said that, Wafa, because what we often do, and that's all of us, right, is what can I do? We often ask ourselves a question, what can I do to change the community that I live in, right? But often what we're committing to is what we can do externally, as opposed to saying, let me look inside myself and say, what can I do within my own organization? How can my organization change so that it can better serve the community that it is supposed to be serving? So thank you for mentioning that. It's a very deep internal look.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it leads us to the next questions
Mm-hmm.
that we have here. That who are the members of the Equity Alliance and what has been accomplished so far. And the Equity Alliance has began with City of Rochester and Destination Medical Center. And as we continue to invite other organizations, anchor organizations in our community to join this effort in order um, to create a collaboration space among organizations to minimize um, the possible duplications of efforts where DMC could be working on something and City of Rochester could be working on something similar. We could collaborate and do that together. So far the members are the City of Rochester and Destination Medical Center. And for the second part of the question, what has been accomplished so far, I'm going to answer it from Destination Medical Center's standpoint, and then I'll pass it to you, Chao, so you could reflect and share some of City of Rochester's journey so far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Destination Medical Center, since our existence in Rochester, we have been committed to doing our work externally through sustainability and equity lens, through all the projects and the development, and um, how can we create better engagement with the community, the creation of community co-design as an equitable engagement tool. But with joining the Equity Alliance, Destination Medical Center has committed to taking a look within as an economic development agency and to understand how our internal practices are they equitable or not. And so we began in 2023 the journey of conducting diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment, which we're really excited about. And hopefully we will have, our report and our um, uh, assessment completed soon, where we would have a clear vision of what type of recommendations that we should implement in the next years, and how can we change our practices within Destination Medical Center in order to not just focus on our work externally, but also create opportunities within Destination Medical Center to be more diverse, more inclusive, more equitable. Part of the plan is, and as Chao shared previously, continued education and continuing the learning. We're looking in 2024 to start a series of training, cultural humility training for um, Destination Medical Center staff. We're looking to create action plans and implementing the recommendations that we will get from the DI assessment. And I have to say, it was very helpful for me as I came into my role after um, Chao already has been you've been in your role for a year, a City of Rochester, and see all the things that you led in City of Rochester. It helped a lot with us starting our DEI internal journey at DMC. So I'll pass it to you, Chao. So hopefully you can touch on some of the things, the
Mm-hmm.
awesome things that you've been doing at City of Rochester.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said, about the idea of learning from each other, because I think that's another underlying benefit of being in the Equity Alliance is having another practitioner, DEA practitioner in a very different role, different capacity, different organization, but the ability to share and talk about what's happening in your own organization and thinking, is this something that would be valuable in my own institution? Because we obviously know that not everything that each of us are doing is going to be valuable, but how do we share back and forth that information? So yeah, what has been good about that is being able to pass ideas between each other. And the hope is, as the Equity Alliance expands and there are more organizations that are part of this, that there would be that resource sharing as well. So for the city of Rochester, you know, I've been in my role almost 3 years now. It's been a journey. Local government has a lot of components to kind of learn, right? And so I don't pretend to know everything about it, but I continue to learn. But from a DI perspective, you know, the first thing that we did was have an audit of the entire organization. Many different departments, lots of wonderful public servants in different roles that are doing varying work, right? So the acknowledgement that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach for all of the different departments. So having an audit of the entire organization to understand what has historically been done from an equity perspective, what are the different services that we provide to the community, is there any indexing that has been done before? So that was the very beginning of it. And then reflecting on that audit and saying, who is the community that we're serving and how do we prioritize all of the things that come out of an equity audit, right? And that was the beginning of our diversity, equity, inclusion action plan, right? It allowed us to look at that audit and then say how we're going to prioritize our work and how we're going to include all of the wonderful teammates that I work with in creating a plan. So asking each department to think about the work that they do and the services they provide to the community and say, what are the things that you could do in your department? What are actionable items that you can accomplish in the next year from an equity perspective? And that was, I think, a little bit hard for people to do because they said, well, I'm not an equity practitioner, right? But it was a wonderful exercise in getting every single person that works with the city and the different departments to think about it that way. So each department contributed action items to our DI action plan, which you can find on our website. So that was the second thing that we have done is kind of have this communal effort in creating an action plan. What action items exist for the fire department, as an example, are very different from what exists for the library. But all of us are working on our action goals that all align to the same goals, right? So working in tandem, but doing different things. The other thing that we really thought about is, you know, as a local government, there are many policy decisions that are being made by city council members. And as teammates, as we share those items for them to make decisions, how do we center equity or at least bring up equity, right? And so we added an equity component to that process. So as we are submitting action items to the council, there is a portion that we all have to fill out as city teammates that says, what are equity considerations for this particular item? And that can vary from a development that's going to go up downtown to an ordinance that is going to be put forward for consideration. And we have to think through as teammates, what are the socioeconomic considerations for that particular item? What are the accessibility components of that item? What are the racial impacts of that item? And it has caused every teammate who's at least sharing an item with council to have to think through those 3 particular items. And then the other thing that we've done is looking at all of the different indexing that exists. So the Municipality Quality Index, when we receive that every year, looking through it and saying, what department can work on this particular item where we've been indexed really low, right? And putting that into our action plan. This last year, and we'll talk about it later, is we committed to the Racial Equity Dividends Index, wanting to know as an organization, what are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? Where is there room for improvement? We've also, based on our index, realized that although we adhere to the ADA, we have a lot of work to do in our accessibility space. So we were able to apply for a fellowship and have a fellow who has joined us and will be with us for the next 2 years, whose primary role is going to be an evaluation of local government. How accessible are we? And then create a change management plan. So the idea of that initial index has brought lots of different ideas that we are now implementing as a result of being in this equity alliance. So I could go on and on, but don't want to spend too much time in that area. But the added benefit is having you, Wafa, on the other end to bounce all of these ideas off of and having the feedback that I get from you.
No, thank you, Chao. And in this slide here, we just wanted to share kind of a recap of what were the topics and what were the episodes that we have shared so
Mhm,
far in 2023.
mhm.
And we began the equity series, which is one component of the Equity Alliance. It's not the whole um, um, concept. The equity series is just our commitment of sharing the education and continuing to educate ourselves as organizations, but also sharing that knowledge as well in the community. And
And Wafa,
so, yeah, go ahead.
could I interject for just a moment?
Yeah.
That's okay. Um, I love the idea of the series because that was really came from you saying, how do we think about all of the organizations that exist in our community
Mm,
and look around the country and say, are there wonderful ideas or great implementation in the healthcare space, in the educational space that we all can learn from? And how do we bring those voices into our community so that we don't feel like we have to come up with everything from the beginning? Because a lot of these ideas or things have been implemented before. So I just wanted to quickly note that about the equity series.
thank you, Chao.
Yeah.
You're being so sweet today. So, one thing that I wanted to also share is, in regards to um, the Equity Alliance and how it requires a tremendous amount of transparency and and understanding where we stand in our journeys, and what matters is beginning this journey and beginning the commitment. And so anything that we have done, whether in Destination Medical Center or City of Rochester, or a new concept or a new idea, and we're educating ourselves and our colleagues at the two organizations, we wanted to create the platform to share that with you. So when we talked about community wealth building in the July episode, we touched on the idea of collaborating in the community and making commitments, organizational commitments, into prioritizing community wealth building and creating equitable opportunities for your disadvantaged businesses, your BIPOC owned businesses, on getting access to create wealth. And then for the August episode, if you want to share a little recap, Chow.
Yes, I loved this one. I love the title, Let's Spill the Tea. And so this was, we had a lot of people say, we would love to be able to transform our organization. We would love to be able to do an audit, but we don't know what that means, right? And
Mhm.
so in this particular episode, we invited Good Enough Consulting, who has been a wonderful partner in kind of auditing our organization and providing professional development to share what an audit looks like. What does it mean? Is it something that we should be afraid of, right? What are the different components of going through an audit? And so it was a good overview of, if I'm committing to an equity audit in my organization, what am I actually committing to and what does it mean? So if you're interested in learning more about equity audits, please, preview that, or actually not preview, view that August episode. And then
Absolutely.
September, I mean, that's all you, Wafa.
The September episode was really awesome. And I remember as we're trying to think of a topic, and um, we appreciate so much Joe Marie Morris, the executive director for the Coalition for Rochester Area Housing, who was able to be our speaker for the September episode and to talk about the ways your organization can support and advance housing initiatives in our community. Housing has so many layers: affordable housing, home ownership, and um, making sure that we're meeting our goals that we have in the community with um, all the growth that we're expecting,
Mhm,
all the opportunities that our community has. How can we meet those housing needs and goals in order to create opportunities for the BIPOC communities who have the largest disparity in Minnesota in terms of home ownership? How can they get access to the most basic thing of creating wealth, which home ownership. How can we create more affordable housing that caters to the different workforce that we have here? How can we create unique and innovative housing solutions for um, families with multi-generational families and
Mhm.
um, there's so many things wrapped under housing, and I appreciate Jo Marie showing up on September and sharing some of the latest updates in terms of housing and how the coalition in Rochester is an example of the collaboration that we hope to also achieve through the Equity Alliance. That private public organizations got together and acknowledged the need of housing in our community and got together and created the coalition. And it, I think the examples that Jo Marie shared in the episode were very helpful, and hopefully it encourages your organization that you're associated with to join the coalition or to learn more or to attend the meetings that they have, the Housing Alliance meetings that they're open for everyone to attend.
Mhm.
And then for the October episode, which hopefully you can touch on a little bit on how City of Rochester committed to that as well.
Right. And so, yes, we know that Minnesota has one of the greatest disparities from a race perspective, right? And the Center of Economic Inclusion, which is what hosts the Racial Dividends Equity Index, has been in existence for a short period of time, but has been really impactful in doing Wafa, I think what we're hoping to do, having
Mhm,
organizations look internally. And so for the last couple of years, this particular index has been available for the private sector.
mhm,
So private organizations are able to engage with the Center for Economic Inclusion and request to have a racial equity index done. And it is wonderful because they have very many different parameters in which they do this assessment, from leadership to procurement to your internal culture of promotions, right? Your organizational culture of belonging. And they measure all of these and provide a report to each organization that allows them to know how is my organization internally contributing to either racial disparities or the building of wealth for these communities, and allows us to then know what are things that you need to change within your own organization. And so when I'd seen some of the reports from the past, and actually the center reached out to the city of Rochester, Olmsted County, and it said, for the first time in 2023, we're going to be offering the Racial Equity Dividends Index for the public sector, right? And when we reviewed the private sector, I was like, yes, this is something that we need to do. Because again, it provides us a baseline for our internal organization. And it allows us to be honest with ourselves. Because a lot of times we often think we're a lot farther than we are, right? In
mhm,
many different areas, not just this one. And so both City of Rochester, Olmsted County committed to being part of that indexing. It was a really great process to do that. We had two great folks who actually joined us in the October session, which was Nathan and Nashan, and
mhm,
both of them assisted us with, here are the questions that we're going to send to you. Here's your time period for responding to those questions, and then generating that report at the end. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, whether you are a private organization or a public entity, if you're a public entity, you're going to get evaluated over 67 different areas or equity standards that you get that assessment on. And it allowed us to be really introspective and ask questions of ourselves that we probably never had, right? And so based on that report, we will be able to decide how we prioritize different areas within our own organization to hopefully get to a point where we could have racial equity. It was very eye-opening episode, and learned a lot about our own internal organization. So
mhm.
that takes us to actually November, which ties to this racial equity dividends index, right? Wafa?
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. So, as Chao, you mentioned how the Center for Economic Inclusion provides this tool and
Yes.
this type of assessment. It's not only for public organizations, but it's also for private organizations. And in the November episode, we invited Garfield Bowen, and he is the Vice President of Environmental Justice at 3M, which is a private large organization company here in Minnesota. And he shared what is the journey that 3M has taken in the past 3.5 years in terms of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion internally and externally. And I think the content and as we were preparing for the episode, 1 hour wasn't enough for it. And it's a really awesome learning opportunity for public entities and for private entities to see how 3M did their process. And hopefully we get to invite Garfield again in 2024 to share some focus areas and dig deeper into how 3M has committed to DEI so far. And one thing that you forgot to mention, Chao, is the Center for Economic Inclusion does publish those reports. And I believe the city of Rochester, because you committed to doing the public racial uh, um, equity dividends
Index. Yeah.
index
Yes.
index. The report just recently came out, and I think there is a highlight
Mhm.
um, um, uh, of 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 Rochester and how we committed to democratic participation in decision making
Mhm.
through co-design. So
Mhm.
we will make sure as we send to everyone the YouTube link is to include the link to the report from the Center for Economic Inclusion. And hopefully that encourages your organization to utilize that tool and contact all the different organizations that we shared in the past couple episodes to utilize these tools and to take a look within your organization and how can you start internally into making equitable changes. And if you missed any of the episodes that we talked about, you can find them in the Destination Medical Center YouTube channel. I encourage you all to go there and watch the episodes. I think I for me, maybe it's my opinion, but I think it is a good start for the equity series. And I'm hoping for more exciting topics for 2024.
Or
Turn
even
over
if you
to you.
participated, but you want to rewatch an episode, right?
Of course, of
Yes.
course, I will rewatch an episode anytime because
Yeah.
it's and another thing to mention too, as organizations committing to continuing education, um, these episodes can be used for team meetings
Mhm.
internally at your organization if you want to learn about the topic, if you want to watch the episode and then discuss it as a team. This is an education tool for you all in the Rochester community, and I hope you utilize that as a way to create your own um, educational journey.
Mhm. And Wafa too, as folks watch these episodes and start to think about their own organizations, if there's something specific that folks are interested in learning about, I think it would be valuable for them to let us know, and we can look and see who in our community and or in the country, right, is implementing a specific process, and if that's information that they're able to share with us, right?
Absolutely. We welcome suggestions and ideas about the equity serious topics, or if you have um, any thoughts about the previous episodes, feel free to contact me and Chao. And we picked the previous topics carefully. We thought of topics that would provide tools for organizations to commit to, and we will continue with that along with, highlighting different things that happened here in Rochester and successes and awesome examples of collaboration in advancing equity or nationwide. So don't hesitate to contact us. And in this slide here, we wanted to just mention to you all that we're moving the equity series live Zoom day. Instead of the fourth Wednesday of every month, it's going to be the second Wednesday of every month. And we're going to continue, of course, to record them, and they will be available on YouTube. We've noticed, I guess, the fourth Wednesday, maybe it falls in different special holidays or busy time, and so we will be moving it to the second Wednesday of every month. The time will still be the same, from noon to 1 p.m.
So join us on the 10th if you are able at noon. Wafa typically sends out those invitations, and we're looking forward to another interesting topic, right, in January.
Yes, new
Yeah,
topic every month.
new topic every month. All right, and just sharing, if you would like to reach out to us via email with questions, thoughts, maybe consideration for being part of the Equity Alliance, this is where and how you could reach out to us, and we'd be happy to get back to you, have a conversation. I know we've had a couple organizations that have done that and wanted to learn a little bit more, so we're open to that conversation. And Wafa, I do have a couple of additional thoughts or questions for you, just about just about your own professional journey, and wondering, we've talked about equity over and over again, but I'm always curious when I meet other equity practitioners, what about your professional journey led you to the space of being an equitable development coordinator in the city of Rochester?
I think it's a tough question to summarize an answer for, but I'll try my best. So
Okay.
I think my professional background was 13 years in banking in Rochester, in a brief time working as an equity specialist for Rochester Public Schools. And then got into economic development, and I think all the different sectors that I've worked in, along with the lived experience that I have living in this community, made me understand some of the deficits or some of the issues that we have in terms of equity and diversity, and how can we make banking more equitable. We're and how it's affecting home ownership, as we touched on earlier. How can we make the education system more equitable in order to have better graduation rates for some communities, and other aspects. And so I joined Destination Medical Center almost 2 years ago now, and my role focuses, and it's a mixture of the two sectors that I've been involved in. So affordable housing, it focuses on equitable engagement through co-design, and help Destination Medical Center with advancing DEI, providing that lens for our work. I think I acknowledge the impact of joining Destination Medical Center will allow me to connect to even more and more sectors, and maybe be part of a team and collaboration to make an impact. So if I was just continuing to work in banking, my impact and would be in banking. But with working for an economic development agency, we touched on business, retail, transportation, housing, anything, you name it. And so it was eh, natural for me to like come to this direction, and to uh, accept this opportunity to work, and hopefully, as we um, continue for the next um, 10 years of Destination Medical Center's existence, we get to see measurable impact and in terms of seeing less disparities and better opportunities for underserved communities.
Mhm, mhm.
What about you?
I was going to say your answer is really similar to mine, so I don't know how to phrase mine, but my background's a little bit different from an educational space. So I taught K-12 for a while in the high school space in the state of Florida, and then moved over to community college and worked in that space. And in both of them, it was really evident, to your point, that these huge disparities, right?
Mhm.
In many ways. I noticed in terms of graduation rates and retention rates, particularly of students of color, but there was also a huge socioeconomic impact. I tell people all the time, I'll never forget the day I was sitting in my office with a student when I was at the community college, and I had this jar on my table that had like candy and bars and that type of thing. And the students was very focused on that, right? And made me ask, when's the last time you had something to eat? Would you like some candy? And the student couldn't tell me the last time that had a meal, right? And starting to ask different questions of my students. So from when did they last have a meal to where were they living, right? To your point about housing, and lots of students that were unhoused, to many other disparities in many, many different areas, And so I started to realize that a lot of things that we were seeing in the classroom, right, or in the educational space, yes, they impacted students in that space, but the root cause of them was so much greater than that, right? It was very much a systemic thing. So what was happening in the community that they were living in that didn't allow them to have access to housing, right? Or food to eat on a regular basis, et cetera, et cetera. And I always told myself, if I ever see a role, encounter a role that is broader, to your point, having an impact on more than one area, that I would love to make that commitment. And that's kind of how I found myself in this role as a DI practitioner in local government. And my hope is really to do my best to work in collaboration with lots of other people in different sectors to impact all of those areas. And I said earlier in the conversation, recognizing that communities don't experience their community just in one place, not just in banking or just in school. They experience the community as a whole. And so as
Mhm.
organizations, how do we work together to change that whole experience for the people that live here, right? That might hold different identities, that have different lived experiences and backgrounds, and that we can all say, or at least they can all say, that they're having a good experience, right? So
Mhm.
that's my story. And so it kind of segues to the next question. I'm looking on the side because I have them written down, is what role does collaboration from other entities in the community play in the success of your equity work?
I think for my specific role with Destination Medical Center, or the actual collaboration and partnership led to the existence of Destination Medical Center. Seeing City of Rochester, Olmsted County, Mayo Clinic, State of Minnesota come together to create Destination Medical Center is an example of how collaboration
Mhm,
is really important. I think I've touched on earlier the Coalition for Rochester Area Housing. Collaboration and partnership are really important in my work, and um, especially as we work in projects and development and anything that would involve also the community as well, decision making. It is really important to have collaboration, partnership, and I don't think I can do my work without the partnership that I have with others in the community, whether it's City of Rochester, whether it's the coalition, whether it's Rochester Public Schools, you name it, many organizations that I work with, and it makes it exciting and it makes it um, fun, but also it helps a lot with um, finding someone to rely on as well as you're looking to advance something. Because when we're talking about disparities and we're talking about um, issues and advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, it's not just one organization. It should be a whole community commitment. So when
Mhm.
you find other organizations jumping into some of these projects and initiatives, it makes it really exciting, and um, I'm very appreciative of it. So,
Mhm. Uh, and you said about disparities and talking about disparities, and I always think about how when we're talking about equity work, we do talk about that a lot, and we should. Um, and I like to think too about the equity work in terms of opportunities, particularly in this space. When we're saying we're looking at our organizations, yes, we're looking at disparities, but really what we want to focus on would be opportunities, right? Where do
opportunity,
we,
not a deficit.
yes, where do
Yes.
we have opportunities to change and grow, right? And transform our community. So what are your hopes then for the Equity Alliance or the Equity Series?
For the Equity Alliance, and I think I'm gonna have you touch on that.
Mhm,
I would love for the Equity Alliance to grow and to include more and more organizations, or all the organizations that we have in our community.
mhm,
Instead of working in silo, we could work together, and we
mhm,
could learn from each other. And the Equity Alliance purpose is not to point fingers or to um, critique, as much as it's a space for learning and to advance community-wide goals. Um, I know what are City of Rochester's goals in terms of housing, for example, in terms of targeted workforce,
mhm,
prevailing wage, um, disadvantaged business enterprises. I know those goals for city for DMC. I would love to see other organizations to join and to learn about what we are doing in terms of these goals. What are we doing in terms of procurement goals? What are we doing internally
mhm,
to create better opportunities for members and businesses from, underserved communities? Um, so that's kind of my hopes for the Equity Alliance, and I hope that we get to see more and more organizations join us.
mhm,
Um, and for the Equity Series, I would say my hopes would be to um, continue to create an opportunity to share learning um, um, opportunities, or um, education opportunity for us individually or for our organizations. It's always great to learn from others, and
mhm,
there's so many examples, even internationally, of how communities or organizations committed to something that is solved an issue in the community. It's not about, like you said, it's not the deficit. We're looking for the opportunity. We're looking for the solution.
mhm,
And I think the collaboration work that we have done in Destination Medical Center with City of Rochester, workforce development with the Bloomberg philanthropies, and how that international impact, seeing other cities, winning the same grant as well and seeing their work, that's a learning opportunity also for us to learn from others and to teach others what we have done also well in our community.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, and of course we all have aspirations, and I think part of my hope for the Equity Alliance is how do we, one, share those aspirations, but how do we support each other to get there, right? I have shared with you that I would love at some point to have a community equity plan, right?
Mhm.
Knowing that we each do different things, we impact different community members in different ways through our services and our programs and our practices. But how do we do that in alignment? And I think that's my hope and goal for the Equity Alliance, is creating alignment for our entire community when it comes to equity work, and to get to a point where we're able to have that community wide goal. I know it's something that those that have come before us have worked really hard on, and that we're able to continue that goal. And so I think, considering time would be a good time to wrap up. So I really appreciate having this conversation with you, but wanted to reflect on something that I saw pretty recently that talked about transformation versus change. And it is something that Susie Ross, who is a practitioner, mental health practitioner, actually said that transformation is an ongoing process that tends to appear ordinary when in fact something extraordinary is taking place. And really sat with that for a long time and followed that with something which is an African proverb. I don't know if you've heard this before, that says if you think you're too small to make a difference, you have not spent the night with a mosquito.
Oh, yeah.
Made me chuckle, but just the recognition that each of us or each entity, well, whether it's individuals or organization, has the opportunity to create a lot of change, right? And that even though it might seem minute in the small things that we do, that one day we will wake up and realize that our entire community has transformed into a different community. And I think that is the biggest hope that I have for the community that I live in, that I'm a part of. So with that, we'd like to thank you for joining us for this December episode of the Equity Series. We're really looking forward to seeing you in the next year, but we're mostly looking forward to the transformations that are going to happen in our community, and that would have each and every one of you join us in that process. And have a good holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, Chao. Thank you, everyone. See you January 10th.